Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Wellness Wednesday. We're so excited to bring these to you week after week for almost 4 years now with just incredible topics and incredible angles showing you the power of activation, activating your body to go to work to heal itself. And today I have the pleasure of bringing Marco on. Marco, one of my favorite interviews so far to date was you, and we were talking about brain mapping and brain health. Marco is the co-founder with his wife Diane of Transformations Rehab and Wellness Center in El Paso, Texas, and it's so large that they've scaled up to 500 patients a week. And it's absolutely incredible what they've been able to do. But Marco, who has incorporated brain mapping and all sorts of things, has also included activation into his protocol for his patients. And it was fascinating. Your last interview with Marco, and if you guys have not seen it, go back and watch the interview I did with Marco. I believe it was last year about this time. And Marco shared activation from his own family. So we spoke about brain health, Marco. We spoke about how it helped your son who was on the spectrum, how it's helped your son who had a brain injury, how it helped your
Yeah.
patients with Parkinson's, all totally different brain angles, and then how it helped you who had a brain rupture. So it was fascinating. I'm so happy, so grateful for you to give me the time to come in here today. So can you just introduce yourself and talk to everyone about Transformation Rehab, how you and Diane had the vision to start it? Let's dive into that.
All right. Well, first of all, Andrea, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here and share with you. You know, Diane and I, we admire everything that you've done and how you are just so diligent and getting the word out when it comes to activation. So it's an honor for us to be here. And you know, it's always difficult to talk about our story, just simply because there was a lot of pain involved. I've been a health professional since 1992, so a really long time. And I was a therapist working for one of the local hospital systems here. I'm also good with numbers. So for several years, I was an administrator doing statistical analysis for the Regions Network. I was blessed to be selected. There was 5 of us that were selected out of 150,000 employees that worked for a corporation called Tenet. I was one of 5 selected to begin the first electronic health record. So that tells you how long ago this was. Everyone's using electronic health records now. So
Oh, it's
I
funny.
was very happy with my job. Thought that's what I would do for the rest of my life. But you know, how many of you know that sometimes life will hand you unexpected surprises? And for us, that came in the form of my son Patrick. Patrick is my third son. And when he was first born, there was nothing really that we picked up on. There was no changes or no delays in his milestones. But around the age of 3 years old, we started noticing that he began to regress. And so he started having a lot of stereotypical behaviors consistent with autism spectrum disorder. And so I didn't know anything about this population. I was more of an orthopedic. I also work with stroke and brain injury patients. And so I didn't really know what was going on. So I was one of those typical knucklehead dads that thought he just needed tough love, right?
I love that.
And yeah, and so eventually I did what any good parent would do. We went and had him tested, and they couldn't ever quite figure out what was going on with him: ADD, ADHD, ASD. So we did what they suggested, which was medication and therapy. And Patrick's system was very sensitive, so it seemed like if there was a side effect to one of the medications, he got it. So I was very frustrated because typically, I know it's hard to tell, but I'm typically a very introverted person, but I'm also a type A. So I like to go out and fix things. And I thought that Patrick just needed fixing. Now I understand all of the moms out there that work with or have kids with on the on the spectrum. They don't like that I would say that, but that was my approach back then. I just wanted to fix things. So we started looking at how we could help him become better, because especially with the autism spectrum, there's a big correlation between persons with autism spectrum disorder, other mental health disorders, and the homeless population. So I thought, this isn't going to happen to my kid. I'm going to do
Hmm.
what I can to help him. And so we started looking, and we through that process we discovered neurofeedback, and then eventually we came across brain mapping. And so we started working with him at home, and he started to make some really good progress. And it was his pediatrician who came to us one day and says, you know, Marco, you really should consider, you're a therapist, you should consider opening up a private practice. I had no interest in that. I was a suit and tie guy making good money at a hospital. And one day he looked at me and he says this in Spanish. He says, "Como eres egoísta," which means, hey, you're selfish. And I thought, well, why would you say that? And he says, you know, your son's doing very well, isn't he? And I said, yeah, he is. Look at him. He's doing great. And he goes, and what about all the other kids out there? And I thought, wow. So he kind of just hit me between the eyes. And so we started looking into our options about opening up our own private practice. And so it was that process that led to transformations. And it wasn't easy. I remember when we first started, we had people telling us from all over the place, professionals, other therapists, physicians, that what we were wanting to do would never work. And I remember I had one therapist that looked at me and says, that'll never work. And I looked at her and I thought, well, why not? Because it made sense to me. She says, because if it would work, someone else would have thought of it by now. I thought, wow, that was kind of an insult to me. That she was just saying that she didn't think that I was intelligent enough to put something like this together. So we did, and that was back in 2010. And you know, my wife and I we worked hard, and yeah, it's grown since then to now. We serve somewhere near 500 appointments a week. We have occupational therapy, speech therapy, and physical therapy, and it's we've been very blessed. And so the community is no longer laughing and saying it'll never work. Now they're trying to
No.
figure out what is it that you're doing because they want to know. Anyhow, that's how the clinic started, and so it was
Mark,
through this journey. Go ahead.
no, sorry. I love that you take it as a challenge. Anytime someone says you can't do it, it's your invitation to go prove them wrong. And
Absolutely,
when you said about being selfish, that just really struck a chord with me. And when something you hear again and again and again with all the incredible people who have discovered activation, the first thing they say, Marco, is when you know this, you have a moral obligation to share this with others. You cannot understand how activation works and not share
yeah.
it with your neighbor. So you may as well like join the party and start sharing the goodness with the world because it is selfish not to.
For sure, of course. You know, and it was through this process that I met up with an old high school friend of mine, Patsy Delgado, and she was the one who first introduced activation to us. And I'll be honest with you, it took me a few years before I would even sit down and look at this. I had no interest whatsoever. I thought this was just like everything else out there. Uh, and there's a lot of health, especially health professionals. We think we know it all, and you know, we wanted to just stick with what we knew worked, right? With we stay within our paradigms. But she was a professional, and she hung in there with me, and she stayed in communication. And finally, I said, okay, let me sit down and look at what this is. And I was blown away because I knew about cytotoxicity and the damage that it does. Now, some people call it oxidative stress, reactive oxygen species. It's all the same thing. And so I remember Patsy was gracious enough to introduce us to Dr. Melody Rodarte, who is an internal medicine physician out of Phoenix, Arizona. And Melody did 250,000 studies on the subject of oxidative stress. Now there's over 350,000. And for me, I started spent the weekend looking at all the different health conditions that were related to oxidative stress, things like cancer, diabetes, Parkinson's, lupus. I started noticing that persons on the spectrum had a very high level of oxidative stress compared to the average population. So I started looking at, well, why is that? What is all of this? How does all of this work? And the more I dove in, the more it just solidified for me that this was something that we were going to do for the rest of our life. And so, yeah, that's how we got to the journey of how we found Livantage, how we found activation, and how we found that we wanted to get rid of and lower oxidative stress. So I call it biohacking, but I've been an activator now for several years. I am 57 years old, or 57 years young, and My blood tests continue to show that my cellular age, my levels of oxidative stress, it's also called lipid peroxidation, is somewhere in my mid 20s. It's under the age of 30. So I'm happy about that.
Let's dive into that because that's fascinating. You just said something that is actually mind-blowing. Let's talk about cellular aging versus biological aging. So what is the difference? What are we talking about here? What does it mean? And how are they able to check that your cellular age?
All right, so everyone knows what biological age is, just how many trips around the sun you've taken. And I've taken 57 trips around the sun. I'll be 58 this year. My mother is 87. And so that's your biological, I mean, that's your chronological age. Your biological age or your cellular age, you can get that measure several different ways. One of the ways you can do that is by measuring your oxidative stress levels. That's a sort of a measure of your cellular age. Some people call it T bars. Uh, we go to one of the labs, and I'll ask for lipid peroxide or excuse me, lipid peroxidation. And so you get your number, you divide it by, there's a formula that goes along with it, and then you multiply that percentage times your age, and it tells you what your cellular age is. So it's a little complicated, but you can certainly find a way to do that, and that's what we did.
That's incredible. Tell us about your mom. And I know you have a story about your dog. And they're both
Yeah, so
activated.
yeah, absolutely. So once I realized what this was going on, and we introduced it to I have patients that I lived in El Paso for a lot. I've lived in El Paso long enough that I have a lot of friends and they have kids. So we introduced the biohacking and the activation to some of our patients and friends and family. And I shared it with my mother, and my mother is all about she loves life. She wants to live as long as you can, and she's certainly not the kind of person that would be very happy stuck in some nursing home somewhere. Not to say that if that's what happens, that's what happens, but not on my watch. And so we started sharing that with my mom. So she is 87 years old. She lives independently, drives independently. She travels every year. This year, in next month, she's going to Scotland. The year before that, she was in Turkey. The year before that, she went to Egypt. Before that, I believe it was she was in Moscow, went to Russia. So every year she flies overseas, does some sort of crazy fun trip, and she travels from here to Spain. And from there she meets up with her sisters who are a lot younger than her, and from there that's where they do their traveling. But my mother travels on her own, and then she was telling me that recently during her last trip, they looked at her ID and they looked at her and they said, "Ma'am," they looked around. Are you traveling alone?" She says, "Yeah." So she doesn't get offended necessarily, but
Yeah.
she kind of laughs and she says, if I can live to be 120, then that's her goal. She wants to live as long as she possibly can. But the quality of life is what is really most important here, is that her quality of life, she lives as though she was my age, 50 something, 60 years old.
What role does activation play? Because last time we really covered, and we do it a lot of our Wellness Wednesdays, we cover like activation, how it turns on the body's antioxidants, and NRF1 activates the mitochondria and the telomeres. Can you kind of summarize how what each individual activator is doing and how it contributes to anti-aging, to longevity, to having that younger cellular age? And
Yeah,
maybe I got that wrong, but biological age and cellular age is the same thing versus chronological
biological age and cellular age is kind of the same thing. The difference is chronological age.
age. Okay,
All right. So
perfect.
to answer your question, we got to look at what we were talking about, cytotoxicity levels, and I've got a few notes that kind of help keep me on track, so I don't veer off and go on some tangent somewhere. But what we're talking about is something that's called oxidative stress, and if you research, you do a search in PubMed.gov, which is the archives of the National Library of Medicine. There's over 350,000 studies. It is, to my knowledge, the most or one of the most researched topics in the world of health. And it's been linked to over 200 different health issues or diseases, things like cancer, diabetes, Parkinson's, lupus, fibromyalgia, autism spectrum, all types of mental health. And oxidative stress comes from everywhere. The food you eat, the air we breathe. One of the things that really struck a chord with me is that since the Industrial Revolution, over 85,000 chemicals have been introduced into our environment. The American Red Cross, they commissioned a group of scientists, and I'm looking at my notes here. They did a study on the blood cord of children, of newborns. They found that the average newborn in America has over 180 known carcinogens, 180 carcinogens in their system already at birth. Our kids are born with these types of toxins. Now, the body typically will produce certain enzymes in order to detoxify. It's our own endogenous enzymes. One of them is glutathione, superoxide dismutase, catalase, and that helps our bodies to detoxify. The problem is that we are so bombarded with environmental toxins that it's really overwhelmed our bodies and we're not able to detoxify. So that starts to cause damage to the cells. It starts to cause damage to the mitochondria of the cells. We know that, for example, I know that we're not claiming that this treats, cures, or mitigates any disease, but we know that one of the major contributing factors to cancer is a mutation of the DNA. And a lot of it is the DNA in the mitochondria. And so all of this can be linked back to the cytotoxicity levels. Well, we wanted to find a way to detoxify. And one of the things that I loved about LifeVantage and the NRF2, Protandim NRF2, is that it activates that NRF2 pathway. And by doing that, you boost glutathione by 300%. You activate catalase, you activate superoxide dismutase to help your body to detoxify itself. Whereas taking an antioxidant like a vitamin C or vitamin E, one unit will remove one free radical. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Whereas when you activate your own endogenous enzymes, the ratio is 1,000,000 to 1. So 1 unit of antioxidant can remove 1 million free radicals per second, every second, in every cell of your body. And so you think about the differences. And I love the way Carrie Williams talks about it's like trying to put out a fire with a Dixie cup compared to having a fire department using one of those big, industrial garden hoses to put out a fire. And so that if we know that we have that level of cytotoxicity in our environment and it's affecting us even down to our children being born, then it kind of made sense to me to get rid of that, reduce that oxidative stress as much as possible. Now, you mentioned something
100%.
about my dog. Um, we have an American bulldog, and I invite anyone. You can do your search. The average life expectancy for an American bulldog is 10 years. Our dog, Layla, is about to turn 15. So she has exceeded her average life expectancy at 150%. Now, if you look at one of the original ABC prime times that John Quinones did, they talk about how activating that NRF2 pathway can help toward longevity. And they're talking about in humans how that would 120 years or so. And that kind of makes sense if the average life expectancy in America is about 80-ish years old. Then if you're looking at 150% of that, we're talking about 120 to possibly the what's called a theory of maximum life expectancy for humans is anywhere between 120 and 150 years old. Now, most people say,
Wow.
well, I don't want to live that long. Well, if you could be healthy, why wouldn't you? I would rather live 150 years and be healthy and then just one day go to sleep and that's it. And then I just expire. So sorry, that may have been more than what you were asking for, but hopefully
No,
that's got.
it is fascinating, and even the concept, like, our first answer is that's impossible until it is possible. And activation really
Right.
is powerful. And I'll tell you, Marco, I take this pregnant and nursing. So I have 8 children. I just realized I didn't even introduce myself because I'm so excited to have Marco on. But I have 8 children. And so the last 3 pregnancies, I have introduced activation because the babies get all the mitochondria from the mother, right? And then
Mhm.
that statistic, Marco, about 180 known carcinogens being in the umbilical cord, that's
Yeah,
also another reason why I'm always activated during pregnancy because we have seen that the umbilical cords are so much more pristine on babies that are coming from activated pregnancies.
yeah.
That's another incredible thing. Can you talk to us about the telomeres? Like, what is a telomere? How is activation supporting that? And why is
Sure,
it
sure. So
important?
yeah, absolutely. And I'll try to keep it simple. Telomeres are kind of the tips of your chromosomes, right? And on the tips of your chromosomes, there is a cap. If you think about a shoelace, at the end of the shoelace, you have the little plastic cap. Well, over time, that cap starts to kind of get
Unravel?
broken up. Yeah, unravel. Yeah. And so then, of course, in your shoelaces, it starts to get frayed. A very similar process in the telomeres of your chromosomes. And as they shorten, as they start to fray, that is what impacts or shortens your lifespan. And we know that oxidative stress is a big contributor to the shortening of the telomeres. So once again, if you can lower the cytotoxicity levels, you can lower your oxidative stress, then it's just it. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it is kind of that simple. Is
Right.
that if you can lower oxidative stress, the natural consequences are longevity and having a healthier life.
I
And
love
and
that that
but
it's that simple.
it really is. And you're looking at, so the nerve 2 helps to activate all of those enzymes, which help to detoxify. Well, then we talk about the nerve 1, the NRF1. Well, the NRF1, we know that once that gene is activated, then that puts your cells into a state of mitochondrial biogenesis. So now you're creating newer and healthier mitochondria. Well, because we know that there's DNA in the mitochondria, when you're creating newer and healthier mitochondria, there's a level of DNA repair that goes along with it. Then when you add the NAD activator, that's sort of like the turbocharger of your nerf1 and your nerf2. So now you start to boost sirtuin activity, which helps again to protect the telomeres. So all of that combined, you start to get your cells are healthier, your DNA is healthier, and it just, again, it's just a natural, simple consequence of taking care of your body. I use this example all the time. People take better care of their cars than they do of their own health.
Mm.
You need good gas, you need oil, you need antifreeze, you need power steering fluid, you need if you have an automatic transmission, you need transmission fluid. You need a lot of stuff to get your car running. Well, how much more so does your body need in order to stay healthy?
I love that analogy. I'm actually laughing because I'm like, our family's kind of the opposite because our van is always dirty. But we have the healthiest food farm to table, and we are activated, all of us. And my kids are like never sick and no earaches, no eczema, like literally the healthiest kids you can get. Marco, I would like
Well,
to
and that's,
shift to, no, go
go
for it.
ahead. No, I was just going to say, and that's okay because you can replace the vehicle, but you only get one body.
Yes, yes, and we use that vehicle to get us here and there and everywhere. I
Absolutely.
do want to shift gears, Marco, because we're at the very end of Autism Awareness Month. I know you
Mm-hmm.
have a powerful story with your son with on the spectrum, and
Mm-hmm.
many patients who have neurodiversity. I know you use biofeedback with the brain mapping. Um,
Yes.
I would love to kind of touch on autism just a little bit. Because and kind of tie it back to everything you did before. Like, we just have this cytokine storm in our body. We have this oxidative stress. We're overwhelmed. We can talk about methylation issues, like maybe it's children on the spectrum are just not able to
Mm-hmm.
get rid of the poisons as fast as we are. And
Sure.
maybe talk to us about activation with autism as an answer just from your perspective in your profession with rehab.
Okay, absolutely. I'd love to do that. And again, I want to reiterate because if there are moms or parent and dads, parents out there
Yes.
with children that are on the spectrum, I just want to make it very clear. I am a parent. I'm also a health professional, and our practice was founded on working with this population. So nothing I say it should be interpreted to that we're trying to treat, cure, or mitigate anything. I know that it's a very touchy subject with a lot of parents. So I want to invite you to fact check everything that I'm going to say. If you go into pubmed.gov, again, the National Library of Medicine, and you do a search for oxidative stress and autism, you're going to find, I don't know what it's up to now, it's well over 1,000 studies showing how oxidative stress it can exacerbate a lot of the stereotypical behaviors of individuals with autism. There's a great video out there by I think her name's Dr. Doherty on methylation. And in it, she does a wonderful explanation of how persons on the autism spectrum, number one, they don't produce adequate levels of glutathione, which is produced in which is made in the liver. And so the other thing that a lot of persons with on the autism spectrum have is they have an accumulation of a neurotransmitter called glutamate in the brain. Now, glutamate is very important. We all have it, but it has to be strictly managed. And so if there's an overabundance of glutamate, it's an excitatory neurotransmitter. So that's what helps, no, not helps, but it causes or it leads to a lot of the excitatory behaviors, the decreases in communication, the lack of eye contact. And so if glutathione helps to decrease it helps to regulate glutamate, then for us it made sense that I wanted to increase the glutathione in my son's body so that he could get those benefits. The other thing is the methylation cycle. So we know that a lot of kids on the spectrum, they have a really difficult time processing things like folic acid, synthetic vitamin Bs. And so the methylated B vitamins are what we know is more bioavailable. And so kids on the spectrum, they do process it. In the video, Dr. Doherty talks about methylated B shots. My kids were not going to allow themselves to get injected, once a week or once, however, whatever their protocols are. So we love the fact that Axio has the methylated B vitamins, and it also has rhodiola rosea, pine bark extract. I call it liquid brain food. So I started giving it to I have 5 biological children, and then I have a couple that I inherited. And so 2 of them were special needs. Patrick was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. So we started giving it to him, and we started noticing some good responses. So much so that he took up judo, and he won the Texas state title and the New Mexico state title. He is now living in College Station and practicing with the Texas A&M judo team. He took the silver medal at regionals, at the collegiate regionals. And next year, he decided he wasn't going to compete in nationals. He doesn't think he's ready yet. But next year, he's made a commitment that he's going to be competing for the National Collegiate Judo Tournament. And he says he's going to be the first neuroatypical to win a national title. And so he's also studying kinesiology. He wants to be a physical therapist, and he is a big advocate for nutrition, particularly how NRF1, NRF2, and can help with brain function. He lives on his own. Well, I'm
Wow.
funding the whole thing. I'm funding it. So he's not completely independent, but he does have his own apartment. He does his own shopping. He does everything. He practices, he studies, he's doing everything he needs to do. When we had people who told us that would never be possible with him. And so that's Patrick. My son Seth, he wasn't really born with anything. He had a traumatic brain injury when he was about 7 years old. And so he was in special education for 8 years. When I first started giving him the same thing, the NRF1, NRF2, and Axio, and within a matter of months, he not only tested out of special education, but by the time he graduated, he was in advanced placement, getting college credit. He is a mechanical engineering major, and he's also in the Air Force now working on jet and rocket propulsion systems. and no more special education, no more special needs, none of that. And he's just rocking it. So we started recommending this to some of our patients here, the ones that we knew. And I'll tell you, we had one child, and I don't want to go over my time. I think I tend to go a little long-winded, but let me give you the most extraordinary example that I've seen. It wasn't one of my kids, but we had a patient that when we did the initial brain map study, his standard deviations were negative 14. Now, keep in mind, anywhere between 2 and -2 is decent. Okay. He was not only beyond -2, he was at a negative 14, at a -14. We started biohacking with him, activating him. Within about, it was a little under a year. So it's not magic. It does take a little bit of time, but within a year, he got to 2.3, from -14 to 2.3. That is a 95% improvement in brain function. He is out of special education. He engages and he was also nonverbal. He had echolalia, which is just repeating what he would hear. So now he engages in full and complete conversations. So, and I see that. We see that so much so that it's very easy for me to just kind of shrug my shoulders and just say, okay, that's another one, because it
Wow.
had become that common. But when I see the tears from the mom's faces, that brings me back to reality that this is not a common thing. So, anyways, I hope that helped a little bit. I hope somebody out there understands that this is for real. It's extraordinary, and it is science based. You're dealing with the biochemical processes in the body, which then, of course, deal with the neurotransmitters of the brain. And when you can get those healthy, you're going to see all kinds of things happen.
Wha I'm crying, and I just can't imagine how hopeful this is gonna be to mothers listening to this. I because of timing, I just have one more question for you, Marco,
Sure,
and
sure.
I wanna touch on this because you mentioned, um, Dr. Doherty was talking about injecting B vitamins, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's that concept of putting things into the body, supplementing,
Right.
injecting, IV therapy. So there's very expensive IV glutathione that you could do. I think those
Mm-hmm.
drips take like 3 hours. Sometimes I was looking at NAD drips, IV drips
Mm-hmm.
that can take up to 4 hours for a high dose.
Sure.
There's all kinds of things. Talk about the difference just real quick. Like, what is the difference between me just giving my child a pill and turning on his own glutathione rather than hauling him down, taking an IV drip? What is the difference there?
Yeah. Um, I will. I'll make it short and sweet.
Love it.
With and I'll tell you, I'll talk to you as a parent. Okay. There was no way I was going to haul my kids off to a clinic, whether it was once a week or once a month or whatever it was, for them to sit there for a couple hours while they got an IV drip. It just wasn't going to happen. So it's much easier to give them a little yellow pill. And if they have a hard time swallowing pills, we would crush it up because Patrick was very kind of very finicky. So we just kind of crush it up and just mix it with something. But it's much easier to give them something at home that's going to activate their own glutathione. It's so different when it's because it's when you activate your own glutathione, it's immediately bioavailable. Your body recognizes it, says, oh, yeah, that's mine. I can put it together. And so you're going to have, not only is it easier and simpler, but it's also more effective when you're activating your own compared to, getting it synthetically. And that goes along with whether it is the glutathione activation, whether it's superoxide dismutase with the our collagen product, which boosts superoxide dismutase by 2,700%, which is also a very important enzyme, or whether it's the GLP-1, which is becoming a big thing right now for weight management and weight loss, especially now as we get into the summer. Um, People are taking injections. Well, there's a lot of side effects that go along with taking something synthetically as opposed to activating your own. Your body looks at it and says, yep, that's mine. I can use it. And it becomes so much more powerful, and your body is uses it so much better.
I love that you transitioned over to GLP-1. So let's touch on that before we let you go. We have a new
All right.
activator. We're always looking to
Mm-hmm.
see like the body makes it. It's not doing it very well right now. What can we do with our natural plants, our herbals, and make it work again, make the body work again? So we have developed an
Good.
incredible GLP-1 activator. Tell me your results on it and just like what you found. I know you haven't tried it out in your clinic yet, but just for me, Marco, I know that when I activated my GLP-1, my brain is sharper. I thought it was sharp already with my
Okay.
NAD and Axio, which I love,
Right.
but GLP-1 for me, I would be interested to see what it does with your patients because very sharp. And then when I go to bed, very deep sleep, like that REM sleep with deep, vivid
Right.
dreams. I love
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
also in
GOP.
control of what I'm eating because I feel like my brain is in control and not my stomach and not my cravings.
Absolutely, absolutely. GLP-1 started off as a medication for persons with diabetes, and then they started noticing that people were losing weight, and so they thought, "Hey, there's a new market for it." So then they started marketing it for as a weight loss system, and it, it's the drawbacks on it are that because it's synthetic, there's a lot of side effects. You got one of them. One of the worst ones could be gastroparesis, which is where you get permanent damage to the flow of food in your stomach, even after coming off of it. So there's lots of side effects, and we don't have time to go into that. What I loved about what LifeVantage did is they figured out a way to activate your own GLP-1. I believe the last time I saw it was 140% activation of your own GLP-1. And so you get a lot of the same, all of the same benefits, but none of the side effects. For me, I started taking it. I didn't really need to lose a whole lot of weight, but my body fat got down to under 10%. It was extremely low. My weight got back down to, I weighed to what I did when I graduated from high school, and my waist size got back down to like a 29 or 30. So I played judo and I do jujitsu, and I was kind of getting thrown around by some of the bigger, heavier guys. So I started hitting the gym because I wanted to put on some muscle mass, because I would much rather still weigh a little heavier, but it be healthy, not be body fat. And so, I mean, how many 50 some odd year old men do you know walking around that can say that their body fat is at 10% or less?
That's incredible.
Yeah. And as far as the brain health, one thing real quick on brain health. One of the things that I found, and I learned a lot of this from Dr. Sveta Silverman, she's a surgical pathologist, is how GLP-1 is activated not only in the gut, but you also activate GLP-1 in the brain. And GLP-1 is a contributing factor to activating brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is a chemical that your brain produces in order to put your brain into a state of neurogenesis, which is the creation of new neurons. Now that's a very controversial topic, and so but neurogenesis is a thing. It's very limited, but it is possible. Also, you're talking about something that's called axonal genesis or dendritic sprouting. Bottom line is, if you can have more brain-derived neurotropic factor (BDNF) in your brain, then you're going to have a much healthier, much more robust network of neurons. So your brain is going to function better, faster, more efficient. And we know that GLP-1 is a contributing factor to that, more than just weight loss.
It really is so much more. When you get the body to do what it's designed to do and get it back to what we call the factory settings, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I love that
Yeah.
you said, let's
So
not overcomplicate it.
it is, and I do all of them. Just so you know, I do all of them because several years ago I had a stroke, and man, my world was turned upside down. And so I remember my wife telling me, because I was in a coma, so I don't remember a whole lot of it. My wife telling me that the neurosurgeon says that he couldn't understand how my brain was, quote unquote, putting itself back together so quickly, and I've made remarkable progress. I'm a person of faith, and I know people out there that they believe differently, and that's fine. But I give all the glory to God first and foremost.
Amen.
But at the same time, I understand that there's a science behind this, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure that my brain gets what it needs in order to maximize its potential.
Marco, when you share your story, I always find, and watching the last interview I did with you, I find it just mind-blowing to believe that you went through that and here you are presenting to us.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
on fire. You just the epitome of health. And
yeah.
I love your story so much. I'm so grateful you came here today. And
Well,
I want to do another one. If you're open, I don't know why my screen is going back and forth. I have a new computer. I don't know if it looks like that for you, but I'm like zooming in and out. But I would love to have you back on, Marco. You're just a wealth of knowledge. You have so much experience. I know that we can talk about so much more and come at it from so many different angles. So I would love to have you back on our Wellness Wednesday webinars. And for anyone that watched this, and if that sparked your interest, if it got you curious, if you want to know more, if you're ready to get activated for the million reasons that would bless your life to get activated, get with the person who invited you to this presentation. They would love to help get you started or direct you or answer your questions or add you to a group where we have more incredible stories like this. Marco, thank you so much for blessing us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really,
thank
really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
you, Andrea. Bye now.